History is a graveyard of secrets, and the cold is its most loyal gatekeeper. Why does the official record of the Roman Empire suddenly hit a brick wall at the Rhine? Why did the most efficient killing machine in human history, the Roman legions, stop dead in their tracks against primitive tribes? We have been fed a lie of mud and fur. The truth is carved in obsidian and frozen in the permafrost of the north. The Romans didn't stop because of a lack of roads. They stopped because they hit the edge of reality. They encountered a force that doesn't just kill, it erases. Today, we decode the Codex Borealis. We will reveal why the great walls of the north weren't built to keep men out, but to keep a primordial infection in. We will follow the ghosts of the lost 9th Legion into a fog that hasn't lifted for 2,000 years. Buckle up. We are about to exhume the nightmare that Rome tried to bury in the ice. 9 AD. 3 legions didn't just die. They were unmade. The official story tells of an ambush in the Teutoburg forest. 3 elite legions under Varus slaughtered by Germanic tribes. But look closer at the panicked reports sent back to Rome. Soldiers didn't speak of arrows and axes. They spoke of the white silence. They described warriors who stood 7 feet tall, whose breath turned the summer air into a blizzard, and whose eyes glowed with the pale light of a dying star. Publius Quinctilius Varus wasn't a fool. He was a high-ranking initiate of the Collegium Pontificum. He wasn't there to conquer land. He was on a mission to retrieve the glacial heart, an artifact said to be fallen from the moon, capable of granting eternal life or eternal winter. When he failed, the breach opened. The evidence history ignores: the mute witnesses. Archaeology has found Roman helmets in the forest with the eye slits welded shut from the inside. Why? Because there are things in the deep woods you cannot look at and remain sane. The lead seals. In the aftermath, Augustus Caesar didn't just mourn. He ordered the ritual damnatio memoriae for the 17th, 18th, and 19th legions. Their names were erased not because of shame, but because their very names had become magical conduits for the entity that consumed them. Augustus wasn't screaming, "Varus, give me back my legions," out of grief. He was screaming because he knew that without those 3 golden eagles, which were actually lightning rods of Jupiter, the gate to the north was now wide open. A wall of stone is for men. A wall of sanctified blood is for monsters. Look at the map of the Roman limes. It's a jagged scar across Europe. Historians call it a border. We call it a containment field. Every fort along the Rhine and the Danube was spaced at precise intervals, creating a resonance frequency designed to repel non-biological entities. The Romans used vitrified stone, rock melted at temperatures higher than any wood fire could produce. How? They weren't using bellows. They were using solar focusing mirrors, a technology stolen from the archives of Archimedes. The secret of the legionnaires. The speculatores. Within every legion, there was a secret unit of watchers. They wore silver-plated masks and carried standards topped with lapis lazuli. Their job wasn't to fight with steel, but to chant the Sol Invictus litanies to keep the encroaching frost fog at bay. The blood cement. Recent scans of Hadrian's wall reveal traces of bovine and human hemoglobin mixed into the mortar. This wasn't primitive building. It was blood magic on a continental scale, turning the entire wall into a living, breathing barrier against the ice walkers. If the wall ever failed, the Mediterranean would turn into a frozen tomb. And in the year 122 AD, Emperor Hadrian felt the first crack in the seal. 5,000 men marched into the mist of Scotland. Not a single soul, not a single sword, not a single bone was ever found. 108 AD. The Ninth Legion, the battle-hardened veterans of the Cantabrian Wars, the elite of the elite, crosses the Eboracum line into the Caledonian Highlands. Their mission: to destroy the blue men of the Minch, the frost entities that the Pictish tribes worshipped as gods of the storm. Official history tries to explain their disappearance with logistical failure or ambush. But ask yourself, how do 5,000 professional killers vanish without leaving a single archaeological footprint? No mass graves, no rusted armor, no broken standards. The truth is written in the mist. The Caledonian Rift. Ancient Celtic whispers tell of a thin place in the highlands where the air turns silver and the ground rings like cold iron. The Ninth Legion didn't die in battle. They walked through a dimensional fold. They were baited into the Glian Ruithog, the frozen valley, a pocket dimension controlled by the Lords of the Northern Lights. The Silenced Eagles. Recent underground sonar scans near the Grampian Mountains have detected high-density gold and bronze deposits arranged in a perfect Roman military formation, 30 feet below the bedrock. They weren't buried. The earth itself phase-shifted around them, trapping the entire legion in a state of chronal stasis. The Ninth Legion became the Legio Mortuorum, the Legion of the Dead. But they aren't dead. They are waiting. In the deep, cold silence of the Scots Hollows, 5,000 Romans are standing at attention, their skin turned to marble, their eyes clouded with the blue fire of the otherworld. The warning of the Picts. The Pictish painted people weren't warriors. They were jailers. Their blue tattoos were made of woad mixed with iron dust, a protective layer against the radiation of the Rift. They didn't fight the Romans to keep their land. They fought to stop the Romans from opening the gate of the Great Winter. By the time Emperor Hadrian arrived, the damage was done. He didn't build his wall to keep the Picts out. He built it to keep the infected Ninth from returning to Rome. When the sun fails, man must build his own. By the middle of the 2nd century, the temperature of Europe began to plummet. History calls it the Little Ice Age of antiquity, but we know it was the entropic leak from the north. Rome realized that steel and blood weren't enough. They needed fire. Under the orders of the mysterious Collegium Fabrum, a massive engineering project began in the heart of Rome, hidden beneath the foundations of the Pantheon. They were building the Aeterna Sol, the eternal sun. The forbidden technology, refining the ether. Roman fire ships weren't just for naval combat. They were equipped with brass canisters containing Greek fire, which was actually a stabilized form of liquid sunlight distilled through alchemical lenses. The obsidian mirrors. At the summit of every major lighthouse from Alexandria to Britain, the Romans installed massive parabolic mirrors made of obsidian and silver. Their purpose? To focus the rare, weak winter sunlight into a beam of high-frequency energy capable of shattering the crystalline armor of the frost giants. But this technology came with a price. Every time the Aeterna soul was activated, it drained the life force of the surrounding land. Provinces that were once lush granaries turned into dust bowls. The empire was cannibalizing its own future to survive a war against a supernatural winter. And then, the sabotage happened. The cult of the Frost Brethren, human collaborators who worshipped the coming ice, infiltrated the highest levels of the Senate. Their goal? To extinguish Rome's artificial sun and let the Grand Borealis begin. Attila wasn't an invader. He was a survivor running for his life. Traditional history depicts the Huns as a bloodthirsty horde emerging from the steppes to crush a crumbling Rome. But look at the trajectory of their movement. They weren't marching toward wealth. They were fleeing from the black blizzard. Behind the Hunnish advance, entire mountain ranges in Central Asia were being encased in a supernatural, violet-tinted ice that didn't melt even in the summer sun. The Huns brought with them a terrifying secret: the stellar steel. Their swords weren't forged. They were scavenged from meteorites that fell during the Great Breach. This metal was the only thing capable of parrying the ethereal blades of the Wraiths of the North. The terror behind the Huns, the shadow of the Scourge. Ancient scrolls describe the Sky Eaters, massive, translucent entities that followed the Hunnish tracks, feeding on the warmth of burning cities. Attila burned everything, not out of cruelty, but to create thermal barriers. He was leaving a trail of scorched earth to starve the entities of the cold. The Pact of the Catalonian Plains. In 451 AD, the Romans and the Huns, bitter enemies, suddenly joined forces. Why? Because on that day, the sky turned a bruised purple, and the first wave of the true winter arrived. For a few hours, the legions of Rome and the riders of Attila fought side by side against a common, non-human enemy that emerged from a localized rift. This was the moment the ancient world realized that the walls had failed. The containment was over. The infection was now inside the borders. Why are the windows of the great ancient basilicas so large? It wasn't for aesthetics. It was for survival. As the 5th century closed and the Western Empire officially fell, the struggle didn't end. It went underground. The Christian Church didn't just preserve books, it inherited the solar blueprints of the Roman speculatores. The early cathedrals were built on the exact nodes of the old Roman limes. They were designed as geomantic batteries. The architectural secret: stained glass resonators. The specific chemical composition of the red and blue glass in ancient cathedrals wasn't for decoration. These windows acted as spectroscopic filters, focusing specific wavelengths of light to maintain a sanctified zone where the frost entities could not materialize. The underground furnaces. Beneath every major altar lies a sealed chamber. History calls them crypts. Our research suggests they were etheric boilers, burning a substance known as white sulfur to keep the spiritual and physical temperature of the city above the freezing point of reality. The Dark Ages were called dark for a literal reason. The sun was weakening. The atmosphere was thickening with entropic soot. The church was the only thing keeping the lights on, quite literally. But what happens when the fuel runs out? What happens when the sacred fire begins to flicker? While Rome froze, Constantinople burned with the light of 1,000 suns. while the West was being partitioned by barbarians who were actually tasked with guarding the local rifts. The Eastern Empire, Byzantium, perfected the ultimate weapon: Greek fire. This wasn't just flammable oil, it was liquid soul. Documents from the hidden archives of the Ecumenical Patriarchate suggest that the recipe involved dragon's marrow, likely a rare radioactive isotope found in the Ural Mountains, and refined ether. The Siege of 674 AD. The Fleet of Ghosts. The Arab fleets weren't the only ones attacking Constantinople. Reports from the siege describe shimmering ice barges that appeared in the Bosporus, manned by tall, silent figures in crystalline armor. The siphon weapons. The Byzantine dromons didn't just spray fire, they emitted a projected heat shield. When the Greek fire hit the water, it didn't just burn, it created a localized summer zone, causing the supernatural ice ships to sublimate instantly, turning the invaders into harmless steam. Constantinople survived because it was the last city on Earth that still knew how to manipulate the thermal fabric of the universe. But even they knew it was a losing game. The cold was patient. It had all the time in the world. Napoleon didn't invade Russia for land. He was looking for the heat engine of the ancients. By 1812, the Little Ice Age was reaching a catastrophic peak. The mysterious year without a summer was approaching. The secret societies of Europe, the remnants of the Roman speculators, knew that the northern rift was widening. Napoleon, an initiate of the highest order, realized that the European solar batteries, the cathedrals, were failing. He marched into Russia because his maps showed the location of the Hyperborean Core, a subterranean sun buried beneath the Ural Mountains. The catastrophe of the Grande Armée, the sudden freeze. In 1812, the temperature in Russia didn't just drop, it plummeted to levels that defy physics. Survivors spoke of horses shattering like glass and the air itself turning into shards of diamond. This was a tactical frost strike by the entities of the void to protect their territory. The Moscow Fire. Moscow wasn't burned by the Russians or the French. It was a thermal detonation. Napoleon's engineers tried to activate a localized etheric well to save the army, but the feedback loop caused a massive incendiary explosion that wiped out the city's metaphysical defenses. Napoleon returned a broken man, not because of a military defeat, but because he realized that the Great Cold was now invincible. Global warming is not a mistake. It is a survival strategy. In the mid-19th century, a shadowy council known as the Iron Circle made a terrifying decision. If they couldn't win the war with magic and solar mirrors, they would win it through thermodynamic brutality. They launched the Industrial Revolution with one hidden goal: to raise the planetary temperature by any means necessary. The carbon secret. Coal as consecrated fuel. The massive burning of coal wasn't just for steam engines. The Iron Circle discovered that soot and CO2 acted as a planetary blanket, thickening the atmosphere to prevent the frost entities from phasing into our world. They traded the purity of our air for the warmth of our survival. The Great Smog of London. These weren't just pollution events, they were smoke screens. In the thick, acidic fogs of the 1800s, The Watchers fought silent battles against the frost wraiths that were trying to manifest in the heart of the British Empire. Every factory chimney was a middle finger to the north. Every oil well was a trench dug in the war against the absolute zero. The ice is melting, but something underneath is waking up. Today we stand at the edge of the final block. As we artificially heat the planet, the northern glaciers are receding. But the scientists don't tell you what they are finding in the meltwater. They aren't just finding mammoths. They are finding Roman centurions, perfectly preserved, their eyes still glowing with a faint blue radioactive light. The permafrost was never just frozen ground. It was a stasis chamber. The final intrigue, the Svalbard seed vault. Why is it really built into the Arctic ice? Some say it's not for seeds, but to store the genetic sequences of the frost gods, waiting for the day the heat shield of our industrial civilization finally collapses. The satellite arrays. Our modern GPS and communication satellites serve a double purpose. They are the modern version of Rome's solar mirrors, constantly scanning the poles for thermal anomalies, the signatures of a new breach. The war that started in the Teutoburg forest in 9 AD never ended. It just changed its tools. From the sword to the steam engine, from the ritual chant to the satellite beam. We are still the 13th Legion. We are still standing on the wall, staring into the dark, waiting for the first snowflake that doesn't melt. Will you be ready when the great winter returns? Or will you be among those frozen in the silence of history?